Hello and welcome to this BTEC Bitesized video on the Tech Award in Music Practice. My name's Sean Chambers and I'm the Chief Examiner for this qualification. In this video we're going to be having an overview of Component 1 of the Tech Award in Music Practice. Component 1 is called Exploring Music Products and Styles, and this is an internally assessed component in response to a Pearson set assignment. So on the previous Tech Award, this component 1 was often assessed by an authorised assignment brief or a centre devised assignment brief, but now Pearson will set the assignment brief for component 1 for each series. So there'll be a different PSA for each series depending on when learners are entered to take the assessment. And a sample of learner work will be moderated by Pearson, so the new Tech Award does not sit in the traditional standards verification process. There is now a new process where a selection of work is sent to Pearson and the centre marks are moderated to ensure that they're in line with national standards. There are two learning outcomes in component 1. Learning outcome A is where learners need to demonstrate an understanding of styles of music, and learning outcome B is where they need to apply their understanding when they are creating and making music. There are 36 guided learning hours for this component, so learners should be timetabled for 36 hours, and that should break down into 24 hours of teaching and learning activity where they work through the content in the specification and develop the knowledge and skills required to then go on to take the assessment in the form of the Pearson set assignment, which will take them 12 hours to do. So now we'll take a look at learning outcome A. So on learning outcome A, learners should explore musical styles. And the different styles they look at should come from the genres that you can see on the screen. And in the specification, there are lists of suggested genres that learners might look at under those broad headings. So they might look at different types of pop styles like reggae, rock and roll, punk, heavy metal and so on. And they may look at different styles of Western classical music such as Baroque and Romanticism and so on. Learners then must understand the stylistic features of the styles that they're looking at, the musical elements, what we might call the music theory, where they look at the elements of music which they will have looked at Key Stage 3, instrumentation, texture, timbre, structure, melody, and so on. So what we want them to be able to do is to say how those musical elements are being used stylistically in the genres that they have chosen to look at. So how is texture and structure and melody used in a piece of Baroque music, and how are those elements used in a piece of reggae music, for example. So how is learning outcome A assessed? Well, we want learners to create a styles portfolio, and this is where they choose 4 different styles of music and tell us about the compositional and sonic features within those styles of music. They can only select a maximum of 2 styles from popular music. So they could select heavy metal and punk rock, but then they would have to select other styles from the other areas such as Western classical music or jazz and blues or music for media. What we want them to hand in is some musical examples lasting 12 to 30 seconds from their chosen styles, and that doesn't have to be things that they've created or performed, or it could be, but it could also be found and pre-existing examples. So they could provide a link to a YouTube clip or embed some audio of an existing piece of music that demonstrates the stylistic features. So they could demonstrate the features of rock and roll by referring to a piece of music like Great Balls of Fire, for example, and then tell us about the use of the compositional and sonic features within that particular piece of music. They should also in addition to their examples, give a commentary. And this is the real important thing, because this is where they show us their knowledge and they tell us about how the structure, the harmony, the instrumentation are being used within their chosen styles. So once learners have got to grips with different musical styles and how elements are used stylistically within them, they then go on in learning outcome B to apply that knowledge by developing some music industry products. And by a music industry product, we are talking about a performance, a recording, a composition, a song, a DAW project. So we want learners to understand what those products are. And also how those products are realised and created. So we want them to explore how performance occurs and the techniques involved with performance and creating and composing music and producing for learning outcome B. The assessment for learning outcome B requires learners to create 3 musical products, musical ideas, and each one of those should last between 30 and 60 seconds, but they must create 3 different products. So for example, they couldn't just do 3 performances or 3 original songs. Learners would need to do a live performance, a DAW project, and a composition for media. For example, they couldn't just do 3 of the same product. So we want learners to be showing us their skills and techniques across 3 different products. And the products they create are in response to a set brief. The Pearson set assignment will give a scenario for which learners then should create their products in response to. So what we want learners to hand in here is the 3 30-second to 60-second examples of their products, and also a commentary where they would provide some information about how they created their products, how they used musical styles and elements, and indeed how their products responded to the set brief within the PSA. Although 12 hours of the 36 guided learning hours is spent on the assessment with the PSA, the types of teaching and learning activities that might be undertaken to prepare learners for the assessment would be things such as listening and analysing music from a range of styles, so they can identify the compositional and sonic features. So looking at key pieces of repertoire from relevant composers and performers and bands and producers and artists, so they can start to recognise those features orally, but also then practically exploring those features. They don't need to perform or create finished pieces, so learners could undertake short exercises where they explore the stylistic features of reggae or explore the stylistic features of samba, for example, in a workshop setting, a group setting, or individually using a digital audio workstation. Learners should be practically engaging with the material, performing, creating and producing. Listening is one thing they can do, but then they should start to put that into practice so that they can understand how to use these elements stylistically in a practical sense. So that will help them to create their music products for learning outcome B.
Thank you for listening to this session, which is part of the BTEC Bitesize Tech Award series.